Hello friends, welcome to lecture number 18. In this lecture, we will study about tourism marketing research process. Instead of giving you a heading of tourism marketing research process, I have given this lecture a heading of marketing research process, because whether we talk about tourism marketing research process or marketing research process of some other type, finally the steps are going to be the same. So when I am telling you marketing research process means I am telling you the process of tourism marketing research process also. So here we will study about the marketing research process, and examples which I am going to give you, those examples are going to be from tourism. So that's how you will be able to understand the tourism marketing research process. So let's move further. Marketing research process consists of 5 steps. First is defining the problem and research objective. Second is developing a research plan. Third is implementing the research plan, the plan which we have developed, implementation of that plan, applying that plan. Fourth is interpreting the reportings and findings, means whatever data we have collected, make sense of that data from the perspective of tourism marketing and then reporting the findings. And finally, on the basis of the findings and reports, final decision to be taken by the marketing managers. So we will study this process in a step-by-step manner. The first step is defining the problem and research objectives. Research objectives come from the research problem. Research problem should neither be too broadly nor too narrowly designed, Both the way it is not advisable, because a broad problem will require more data to be collected. More means the data which is not required, which may not be even relevant or not required for solving the type of problem or the problem which we are dealing at that point of time during that particular research, but still we are collecting the data. So not too broadly, because we will collect more than the required data, and not too narrowly, because then we are going to collect lesser data, hence the managerial decision will be based on limited information only. So it should be appropriately designed, neither too broadly for wastage of resources, nor too narrowly where we do not have the necessary information to take the right decision at the right time. So the problem definition should be based on what is to be done, that is the content required and why is it to be done, that is what are the decisions which the management wants to take. Okay, so based on that decision which the management wants to take, we decide the data to be collected. Okay, that is the content required and why it is to be done, that is what are the decisions which the management wants to take after the research. An easier way to define the problem is to know the decisions which management wants to take. So it is to be a backward process. Okay, we will not start with the problem, we will start with the decision which the management wants to take and do a rigorous discussion with the research team in deciding the information which is needed to take the decision. So take decision into loop, what management or the not tour managers but decision makers or marketing managers wants to decide. Based on that, decide what kind of information to be needed. Based on that, search what is that information which is not available, and then we will get the research problem. Okay, the end result is a well-defined research problem with a to-do list to solve the research problem, which in the language of research is called research objectives. So once we get research problem tells us what do we need to do in order to solve the problem. The moment we get to know what we need to do, that to-do list becomes our research objective or research objectives, depend if it is one research objective, otherwise research objectives. So, the best way to do this is to start in a reverse mode. Start with what decision to take, go in reverse order, reach at research problem, and then make a list of all the actions or the task which needs to be performed to solve that problem, and that to-do list becomes our research objectives. So, next step after deciding the research problem and research objective is to develop a research plan. Okay. Developing a research plan means deciding on data sources, deciding on the research approach. Research approach means making a plan how to conduct the research. Then data collection instrument, how is the researcher or the researchers going to collect the data. And then the last one is method to contact the respondent, that is sample collection. So, developing a research plan is deciding on data sources for both primary and secondary data. Researchers collect secondary data not only to understand the problem clearly, but also to check that maybe sufficient secondary data is already existing and the researcher does not require to collect the primary data at all. So, if there is a research which was done in the past, which is somehow similar to the problem which the management is facing right now, either in the same company or in some other company, then in that condition that research becomes a secondary data source, because that research actually tells that how the problem was solved during that time, and then that becomes a source of information or a kind of guideline for the researcher to go ahead with his own research if he wants to go ahead with this. Sometimes what happened through secondary data itself, we get so much of the information that the researcher need not collect the primary data at all. So, and secondary data collection is an easier as well as economical process. So, it's like a shortcut kind of a thing to get the desired solution, instead of spending more money and time and then collecting a data which will again going to give you the maybe similar kind of research. So, secondary data analysis is very important here. Okay. When either sufficient secondary data is not present, or maybe is incomplete, or maybe obsolete. The research was done, let's say, maybe 10 years back. The business scenario has changed. Technologies to sell have changed. The preferences of customers have changed. The policies have changed. So, in that condition, maybe the research is available, maybe the research is talking about the similar problem, but then the business environment and practices have changed. So, the researcher needs to collect the data once again to make it more sense with the contemporary problem and not a problem, which was, which happened a couple of years back. So, if the data is obsolete or maybe is not appropriate, okay, somehow connected, but then the cultural scenario is very different. That problem had happened, let's say, in that part of the world which has altogether a very different way of thinking. It's business ethics, their their culture, their tradition, everything is so different, especially if we talk about in tourism industry. Culture and traditions are like integral part of the tourism product. So, it may be a research which was not done past, so it's not obsolete, may be connected, but then it's not making any sense to the problem at hand. Reason being, it is not having the relevance to the problem. Okay, that connectivity between these two is missing. So, I mean, somehow it is not enough to get the solution to the problem. Only then the researcher goes ahead and collect the primary data. So, he gathers information from secondary data, then he decides whether he needs to collect data, or that is primary data, or does not need to collect the primary data. So based on that, based on this analysis of secondary data, the next step, that is planning primary data collection, is planned or not planned. If sufficient information is there, not planned. If sufficient information is not planned, is not there, then of course the researcher has to go ahead. Now after that, the second step is deciding on the research approach and the type of research, which means how does the researcher plan to conduct the research. The researcher can do an observational research, wherein he can observe his respondents in a usual routine settings without any interference. Means his presence is negligible. It's like he is not present over there, and then he observes the entire setting. It is very, this kind of a research is very prominent in case of consumer behavior. They are shopping behaviors. So usually the observer goes and sit over there, and then he observes, like how the actual real life consumers are behaving at a marketplace, the real life marketplace. So interference, or he also do a focus group by inviting maybe 5 to 10 group members and then appointing a knowledgeable and skilled moderator. Role of moderator here is very important, because moderator is the one who starts the discussion, who throws a topic to the group from where the discussion starts. And if during the process of discussion by this group of people, if by chance for some reason they go haywire, or the moderator thinks like that the kind of discussion which has been happening is not going on the same track, providing the kind of information which he wants, then he actually intervenes there and then brings the entire discussion of the group back on the track as per the requirement of that particular research. So he can also do a survey research if needs to know about people's preferences, satisfaction, beliefs, etc. Means it is a behavioral research. So if it is a behavioral research, survey method is the most prominently used method. In case of survey method, the researcher needs to prepare a questionnaire. If the researcher needs to check the effect of any cause, then he can do an experimental research also. So experimental researches require more resources and expertise, as the researcher then need to control or eliminate all other variables, which are also known as extraneous variables, which he is not investigating at that point of time. So when we look at the research approach which actually the researcher can follow, then that research approach can be an observational research, it can be a focus group discussion, okay? It can be a survey method, it can be experimental research, so, and this is not an exhaustive list. The list actually goes beyond it. These are few of the examples which I have given you, which usually tourism marketing researchers they follow, okay? Now next is data collection instrument. How to collect the data? What kind of tool will be used to collect the data? So tool for data collection. Data collection instrument actually in marketing researches generally use either, researchers generally use either a questionnaire or any kind of qualitative measures. So it can be either a questionnaire or it can be a qualitative measures. Or some other kind of technological device can also be there. These are three most commonly used, okay, for the primary data collection. A questionnaire is a set of questions and is the most commonly used instrument for collecting primary data. So, first one, questionnaire, most commonly used, and it is a collection of couple of questions which are usually prepared on the basis of the research problem and secondary data analysis. And it must be carefully designed, including as far as possible both close-ended and open-ended questions. Why both close-ended and open-ended questions? Because closed-ended questions give only limited options to the respondent to respond to. So, respondent may think beyond the options which are given. So, get an input on those options, get information about those things also which are not available in the questionnaire, but still there is a segment of the market which thinks in that way. Open-ended questions are needed. Open-ended questions are like, it's a complete freedom to the respondent to provide his input in whichever way he thinks about that particular question. In case of an exploratory research, open-ended questions are a must to be included. For getting an in-depth understanding, researchers prefer to conduct qualitative measures because these researches provide freedom to the respondent while giving responses. So, in case of questionnaire also, the respondents have a scope to give an answer about a particular question the way in which they think. And in case of qualitative measures also, the respondent has a freedom. Here in qualitative research, the in-depth analysis about the respondents thought process, decision making, preferences, frequency to purchase, or any kind of abstract thought is actually higher, because here in qualitative measure there are no fixed questions like questionnaire. In qualitative research, questions are very, I will not say vaguely, but very leniently designed. So, after just asking one or two questions, the researcher generally asks those questions to the respondent which can actually be drawn from the previous responses of the respondent. So, in questionnaire, the questions, even if the questions are open-ended, the questions are prefixed kind of a thing, the questions are pre-decided. While in case of qualitative measure, maybe couple of questions to start the discussion, maybe 2 questions, 3 questions may be pre-decided. But what happens after that? After that, the researcher asks those questions which can be drawn from the discussion which has been, happening between the researcher and the respondent. So that's how, questionnaire and qualitative measure are different, and especially open-ended questions in case of questionnaire and qualitative measures are further different. Now, next is technical device. When researchers need to investigate into the somatic responses towards a stimulus, then they use technological devices to measure the responses. Some of the commonly used devices are galvanometers, tachystoscope, eye cameras, skin sensors, some device to check the heartbeat, respiration, perspiration. These are the commonly used technological devices. Technological devices are more used in case of checking the effect of a particular stimulus, which may be sound, which may be some kind of 3D, 4D, 5D, 7D, even 10D. Studios have come up which provide the experience to the tourist, wherein the chair on which they are sitting is also moving, air blow is also coming up, water spray is also coming up, lot of sound is there, and 3D image is being portrayed, and Dolby sound is there. So these are like different kind of dimensions which the event organizer tries to create. So here actually, for checking the impact of all these stimulus on the viewer, these technological devices are being used. So now, fourth point in this is method of contact, how the researcher will contact his respondent to collect the data. Method to contact the respondents or the sampling plan comes under sampling strategies, and it can only be prepared after deciding the research approach and instrument for the data collection. In this, the researcher needs to decide what should be, who should be the respondent, who are the people whom the researcher going to collect the data, that is the sampling unit, and then the total number of responses to be collected, that is the sample size. So, first of all, who will be the respondent, the sampling unit, and then after that total number of responses to be collected, that is sample size, and then finally how to choose the respondents, that is sampling procedure, how to select those people. Then probability sampling is the most commonly used method, as it allows the sample or the data to be more representative. After deciding the sampling plan, the researcher decides the contact method, which can be through an email. Contact method means contacting the respondent. So, this can be through email, in person, or by telephone. Nowadays, WhatsApp has also become a very common mode. An online interview on Google Meet or Skype is also an accepted mode. So, these are different methods of data collection. So, here we have studied about sampling plan, sampling strategy, and then how to contact, and then how to collect the data. Next is implementing the research plan. So, the research approach is there, research plan is there, sampling strategies are there, tool for data collection is there, what kind of data is to be collected, from how many people it is to be collected, everything, the entire plan framework has been set. Now, it needs to be implemented. Okay. Now, we need to understand here that it's an expensive process. So, before implementing the plan, the researcher has to be doubly sure that he has made the plan in the right manner, minimizing the possible errors. Implementing the research plan. So, now the researcher implements his plan and collects the information. It is an expensive process and prone to frequent errors. So, it must be done very prudently. Okay. As far as possible, the researcher must collect unbiased and honest responses. This is very important. The data has to be unbiased and honest. And here the interference of researcher is also, as far as possible, prohibited. Facilitation is a different thing. If the respondent has not been able to understand what the researcher is saying, then that facilitation is a different thing. But interference or asking leading questions, or if not that leading question, then trying to put the words in the mouth of the respondent, that is something which has to be strictly not done at all. Okay. It is an expensive process and prone to frequent errors, so must be done prudently. As far as possible, the researcher must collect unbiased and honest responses. The researcher must not give the opinion while collecting the data. If the researcher is collecting data internationally, then he must adapt himself depending on from where is he collecting the data, means which part of the world, with whom is he collecting the data, who is the respondent, and for which firm is he doing the research. So, the philosophy of the firm, the thought process of the firm is also very important here. He should take the cultural nuances into perspective while collecting and interpreting the data. So, it is not only about during the collection of data, but while interpretation of the data also, it is very important that cultural nuances are taken into consideration, in fact serious consideration. For example, Asian respondents generally need a confirmation of the purpose of the data collection. They, till the time they are not sure about the reason because of which the data has been collected, they will not give the responses. So they need a reassurance about the purpose of the data collection. Okay. And then Chinese respondents are lesser serious and have frequent language barriers. English, commonly used language for data collection or for preparing questionnaire or report, is not so commonly spoken in China. So that way language barrier does come up while collecting data from Chinese respondents. And Chinese respondents have a little lighter thought or lesser consideration also while giving those responses. So here, the researcher needs to take all these responses with a pinch of salt and his own experience and observations. I mean, it cannot be just on the paper. He has to take it seriously whether that particular response has to be considered or not considered on the basis of his observation while collecting that data from that particular respondent. How serious was that respondent at that point of time while he was giving the response. Okay. Now, next is interpreting and reporting the finding. So, interpreting and reporting the finding starts with the tabulation of the data. Now, the researcher tabulate the data and applies test as per the requirement of the research approach. The purpose for applying these tests is to get the additional information which is hidden by having only a general look at the data. So, when you look at the data, there are couple of things which may not be so much evident, but when the researcher actually applies test or test, then he gets to know that information which was hidden. When he looks at the data, let's we talk about a data of 500 respondents. It's not so easy to get a meaning of that data only by looking at that data. But when the tests are being applied, test actually summarizes most of these tests. They actually summarize the total meaning of that data. They test actually give meaning to the data. Otherwise, it's difficult to make sense of data, especially in case of big data. Okay. The purpose of applying these tests is to get the additional information which is hidden by having only a general look at the data. The researcher may test the hypotheses, theories, assumptions and strength of the result. The main purpose of the interpretation of the data is to translate the data into recommendations. Okay. So, data, then test, then result, but these results are not that important for the decision maker or to the marketer. What is more important is actually the recommendation which this researcher gives. Achha, let me tell you one more thing. The researcher does not give the decision. The decision has to be taken by the marketer. The researcher gives only recommendations, and based on these recommendations, the tourism marketer takes the decision. And it helps the marketing manager in deciding a course of action. Here, the researcher needs to understand that if he is performing an academic research, then he can use a technical language to present the findings. So, this can be a technical, while this is not the case in case of a business research. Business researches have to be in easy to understand language. In fact, if possible, business researches can be in the form of graphs, images, videos, audios, all these means of communication which are comparatively easier to understand by the marketing manager instead of just providing providing a very technical report. Okay. Now after all these findings and other things, the final step comes up, which is about decision making. So now the researcher has actually translated the data into an insight and recommendation which can be used by the decision maker to take the decision. Okay. So based on the insights and recommendation, the decision is being taken. So researchers provide findings and relevant information to the decision makers. Now it is up to the decision maker that whether he wants to use it to help him taking the decision, or he simply outrightly discards it. We need to understand here one thing, or takes the decision, that irrespective of the money, time and other resources which are being applied in conducting that particular research, after getting the final report, it is the decision of the decision maker or marketing manager to whether take this report into consideration while making a decision, or simply discard it and take a decision on the basis of some other information which is available with them. So here the credibility of the report has to be very high. The credibility of the not just report but the entire research itself has to be high, so that the report is taken into consideration while taking the decision. So here I am stopping this particular lecture here. At the end of it, I have given you a list of 5 books which you can refer to collect additional information on the topics which we have discussed today in this lecture. Thank you, friends.